All right. Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the Fun Fans Podcast. I'm your host, James Dillard. With me for the first time, sitting in for my normal co host, the son of Bailey Jackson, Mr. Whit Jackson. How you doing this evening, Whit?
I'm great. Great to be back.
He's back. He's actually back 2 weeks in a row. And as you can see, we have a special guest. It's a Memorial Day special here. And we're going to get to Captain West here in just a second. But first, we got to point out that the Fun Fans are a proud part of the Fanboys Fangirls Sports Podcasting Network. If you're a true sports fan, the Fanboys Fangirls is perfect for you. Find various nationwide podcasts and other sports media at thefanboys.com and all forms of social media. The Fun Fans podcast is the official podcast for Clemson fans. And Whit, you can do this better than your dad, right?
I hope so.
Tell them what we like to eat.
We love Reuben's Food, Sports, Spirits, and Catering. The best wings around with 2 locations in the upstate. 1083 Batesville Road in Greer and 11028 Anderson Road in Piedmont, South Carolina. Find them at Reubens.com. It's a great place to eat if you're a sports fan.
That's right. It is a good, and your dad has memorized that. So he's read that so many times. So we greatly appreciate anybody that reads that, and we definitely appreciate Rubens. All right. So our special hopefully folks are celebrating Memorial Day. We're able to do things like goofy podcasts like this, thanks to those who have served our country. And we have with us this evening a special guest for our Memorial Day show. And we are aware that Memorial Day is designated to remember those who gave the ultimate sacrifice during service. All right. So, but of course, can't interview one of those guys. But what we have on the podcast is somebody who's dedicated his career life to the military. He has served in 3 branches of the military. He's currently an officer with the United States Space Force. Started out in the Army and then went to Air Force. And he's just a fine young man from what I remember when he was back in high school. And from what I see on social media, he's also a pretty big sports fan. So we'll talk some sports with Captain Dylan West. Captain West, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Doing great. Doing really well. We appreciate you being on here, and we appreciate your service. And we'll get your story. So start out with how did you decide to get into the military, and like how long you have to kind of give away your age. I know it's pretty much ever since high school or college, but how long you've been serving our country?
Yeah, so I joined the South Carolina National Guard, actually. I was a student at USC Upstate in Spartanburg. I joined back in 2008, so that's been a while now, 16 years.
Yeah.
And I joined the Guard because I was going to college and I didn't want to drop out of school, but I was interested in trying to find a way to serve. I come from a long line of service members on both my mother and father's sides of the family, grandfathers, brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, my dad, you name it. So I was always interested in doing that, and joined that in 2008. Sorry, let me silence that.
It could be the president, so it's fine.
So joined in 2008, went to boot camp at Fort Benning, which is now called Fort Moore, down in Georgia, to become an infantryman. And that's kind of what I started out doing. Deployed a couple of times to the Middle East when I was in the Guard, all of 2010 and all of 2012. And then from there, I was kind of on and off with college. College took me quite a while to finish. I ended up opting for the online route because I was kind of gone a lot, right? Mm-hmm. So, I finished school in 2014. Yeah, 2014. And that's about the time. 2015 was when my contract with the Guard was running out. And I was interested in going active duty. And I wanted to try something different. So I took the test to see if I could become an officer in the Air Force and applied and waited a while, but then finally got in, found out I was accepted. It was a huge honor. And the job that they gave me, I was actually kind of surprised with my background, but the job they gave me was space operations. Mm. And so started doing that. And kind of the way that rolls into the Space Force is the segment of the Air Force that did space operations, it was literally called Air Force Space Command.
Mm-hmm.
When the Space Force was officially created, that part of the Air Force was basically just removed from the Air Force and became Space Force. So I had the option to stay in the Air Force or transfer with it. And I decided to just give it a shot. And so that's kind of how I ended up with the whole 3 branches thing. It sounds kind of crazy, but that's kind of the quick down and dirty of how all that went down. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. And I think the other part of your question is, what got me serving well, like I say, just, 2 of my 3 brothers, my dad, my grandfathers, it was just a thing for our family. And, when I wasn't exactly sure what else I wanted to do with my life, I found a calling somewhere else, thankfully, because I wasn't the most amazing athlete. I always had fun doing it, but, statistics show very few people make it to the top,
That's right.
So
for sure.
Thankful that I was able to find a calling that, serves a purpose larger than myself, in the greatest nation in the world. So.
Amen. All right, Whit, what you got?
Okay, so like some people are in a branch their whole life. That's their one branch. But like, to your knowledge, how rare is it that somebody serves in like multiple branches?
I think it's more common than you realize. Maybe not super common, but now with the Space Force, most everybody that's in the Space Force started out in a different branch.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we have now, recruited some, I guess what you could call, organic guardians, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
who, joined straight into the Space Force. But, most everybody that was in it at its inception came from the Air Force. And the organization that I'm actually in, we took in an entire battalion from the Army that did communications.
Oh, wow.
That's now a squadron in the Space Force, in the organization that I'm a part of. We have folks that were in the Marines, folks that were in the Navy. We took in a Navy unit that's now in the Space Force as well. It does communications down in Southern California. So it's kind of neat. So with the Space Force, you'll see it a lot. But when I was a soldier, we actually had a lot of guys that had been in the Marine Corps that got out of the Marines and then wanted to continue serving in some way and came to, the Army Guard to do it on a part-time basis. So I think it's more common than you think. I don't know many people that have been in 3.
Yeah.
I think there's a few, but yeah, there's more folks than you think, but it's not super common, I don't think.
So you pretty much answered my next question about how you landed in the Space Force. But so let's just kind of say, if you had to give a job description for, what you do for the Space Force, what would that be? And maybe in terms that even somebody like myself can understand, I guess. So just in case.
So right now, my job title is called executive officer. So I work for a colonel, the commander. So I kind of run his office and manage his schedule and his meetings and stuff like that. So my current job is very, very heavy on the admin side.
Gotcha.
Pushing a lot of papers for about a 1,300 person organization that I'm in. So that keeps me busy. Before that, and our folks that are at work right now down the road, 24/7, 365, we do military satellite communications.
Okay.
So anything from providing communications to, tactical users, warfighters on the ground, to protected, very secure communications for the President, Secretary of Defense, the nuclear arsenal, the communications that those, the subs and the bombers and stuff like that, all those comms are managed by our organization as well. We also provide tons of different things to, the American people across the world, in addition to just, the military, because we provide GPS. Space Force operates and manages that.
Mm-hmm.
Missile warning, kind of hand in hand with Missile Defense Agency too. We kind of each play a separate role, but with radars, space-based assets that can detect heat on the ground. Most of that's operated up in Aurora near Denver. Civilian applications to that as well, because they spot fires very early.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we're able to pass that information back to civil agencies to help out, very quickly. So there's a ton of things that we provide outside of just standard military stuff that benefits people around the world. So it's really a tremendous honor to be part of an organization, really from the ground up when it started, that provides such critical capabilities to not only the warfighter, but just the American people as well.
Very good. All right, Whit.
Okay, so what's like the coolest story or most memorable experience you have from being in the armed forces?
Yeah, so this one, a lot of ones to sift through that I was thinking about. I think one of the coolest ones, outside of the countless just fun memories, making lifelong friends, it was when I was in Afghanistan back in 2010, so it's been a while now. I was really just a guy providing security. I was the gunner in a Humvee, but what we were doing was what we call civil military operations. So building projects to improve communities. That's the simplest way to put it. And we would go check on the progress of construction efforts and things of that nature, meet with the village elders, play with the kids and stuff like that. And I remember this one specific day, I think it was in September or October of 2010. We went out to this little tiny, very remote village, and they said that it was the first time they'd seen an American service member, which I thought was a little odd since, we were about 9 years into the war at that point. But we were there putting in a well for them to have fresh water to drink. And I remember seeing these little kids. They'd walk way down this hill to get some water, and they put it in buckets, and they'd carry it hundreds of yards back up this hill. And then by the time they would get back to, their home, the water's already dirty. It's just gross, right? So I remember thinking, like, something that we take for granted, right? Clean water to drink, to take a bath with, whatever. It's not something everybody has. So taking a step back, thinking about that, realizing that, again, I was just the young guy making sure that no bad guys came around, and the officers and stuff, we're doing all the talking. But we were out there throwing a football with the kids. We were out there with the Afghan army as well. The kids were just loving it. Obviously, football is not something big there. It's more soccer, but tossing the football around with them, seeing the smile on their faces, and knowing that we were there to do something small, but something probably pretty huge for them. And just being a part of that, that's the kind of the humanity aspect of an otherwise very sad situation that could at least put a smile on your face.
Right. Yeah,
So I think that's probably my answer. Yeah.
That's very cool. Very cool. I'm sure they were, that's the kind of stories that a lot of times, sometimes makes the movies and sometimes don't. And hopefully appreciate you sharing that with us on the podcast.
Yeah, it gets overshadowed by all the bad stuff, but there's a lot of good things that go on that those stories just don't get told.
Very good. I was speaking of things that shouldn't be told. We're going to assume that that you have information that you probably can't share on the podcast, right?
That's
yeah. So being a captain, especially if you work right in an office with the colonel, and I got to thinking about that, kind of joking about, tell us, obviously you can't tell us something you can't tell us, but I'm like, that in and of itself must be somewhat of a burden, not just serving and, being the folks out in the field, but is that a burden, kind of knowing information that you have to keep secret and can't even tell whoever, probably like your spouse, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I think sometimes it is. there'll be things that come out on the news and is, a shock to everyone else. That might be something that I've known about that I just can't speak to.
Right.
We are privy to a lot of sensitive information, and that can be a burden sometimes. While it might sound cool, and to an extent it is, coming home from work and knowing something sometimes, and then your spouse asks you, how was your day? Like, oh, well, it was good. Just work.
Right.
But you got some of these things up here, and you kind of have to just sit on it. But that's part of the job, and that's what the the American people and our government trust us to do, is to know these things, do our jobs, act on these things, but keep it to ourselves unless you're in the appropriate facilities around the right people. So I to answer your question in short, sometimes yes, I would say it's a little bit of a burden.
I bet. All right, Whit, what's next?
Speaking of burdens, us citizens, U.S. citizens, any of us with like any level of patriotism, we remember and honor like the fallen soldiers. Like we post stuff on social media, say things, get the word out, But like, is it different? Is there like a difference between like remembering people? Is it more emotional for you as a person who has served?
Sometimes, yeah. Really not much difference between myself and, patriotic folks all across America, right? We all value a lot of the same things and, honor folks like you mentioned. Yeah. And everyone's experience is also different depending on, what jobs you've done for the service, where you've been. So some folks have it pretty rough. They've dealt with a lot of loss with their friends over the years, and some plenty more than me. But when we went to Afghanistan, we had a couple guys that didn't get to come home, and so I always think about them. In the years since, there have been a lot of folks, some that I was closer with than others, but that I guess you could call it the war within, a psychological battle that people face and sometimes succumb to. And that's very difficult to deal with as well. So I would say that, for many folks like myself, it hits home pretty hard. So yeah, this holiday is always very special. It's very sacred. But I have found sometimes over the years that it's a day that I kind of just want to come and go, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Like, like Mother's Day or Father's Day for someone who's lost a parent, or it's very similar in that regard, I think.
I bet I can only imagine. So changing gears a little bit, like I say, I know you're a sports fan and I'm pretty sure you like college football.
Yeah.
Who's your team? All right, who's your team, and what's your quick sports analysis prediction for your team this coming fall?
Yeah, so obviously grew up in South Carolina. Most of my family's either in Florida or Texas, so I grew up watching the Seminoles, and much like my Braves when I was a kid, the Seminoles were riding pretty high in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Had a little bit of a rough go. Obviously, as a Clemson guy, you guys have been on the good end of that for a while. They've had a tremendous run. So it was a kind of stunk the way last season ended with Jordan Travis getting hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time since they were that good. And so with it kind of to fizzle out that way at the very end due to a very significant injury was kind of hard to watch. But also coming into this season, it's going to be very interesting because the biggest question they had to answer was who's going to be the quarterback, right? And as an avid Clemson fan, you're very familiar with who that is.
Yeah, DJ.
Yeah, and so obviously he had his ups and downs at Clemson, played really well
Yeah.
last year at Oregon State. I don't know if that was a little bit of a comeback of sorts for him. So yeah, we'll see. It's going to be interesting. They lost a lot of guys to the draft, like Clemson has for years now. When you put together a program that performs at that level and recruit the right kind of talent, and now with the portal, that's kind of weird. But you're going to lose guys every year, and it turns into a revolving door of the best talent you can get. So yeah, losing the quarterback, both wide receivers, the running back, Jared Verse coming off the end, Braden Fisk. That Verse and Fisk were actually the Rams' first and second round draft picks, and those guys were quite a force. So it'll be interesting to see. Also with Florida State and Clemson both being kind of at the forefront of this controversy about the conference and all that. I don't know what the future holds there or where they're going to end up.
Yep. So much fun in college football right now.
It's wild. It's wild. The big news this week, I think actually that might lead into something else you wanted to talk about was, there's NIL. That was big news in the last year. And then now the whole news about schools being able to pay players directly and having roster caps. And, it's just a miniature NFL. So
right. It's the junior league. So how do you feel about that? What's your thoughts on the whole thing?
I can't blame the kids for wanting a piece of all the money that the universities make, especially the football programs. That's really what drives everything, right? Monetarily speaking. So, the NIL thing was kind of a way for them to get their cut. And obviously that's a have and have not situation too, because some players get more attention than others. And that's kind of the way it is. The whole paying players directly thing, I don't know. I'm still trying to process that news. And I know that none of us know what that's going to look like just yet. I think my initial reaction was I was a little sad hearing it, just because one of the reasons why people love college sports so much is because it's still pure.
Right.
And
amateurness.
Exactly. Just like the Olympics, a lot of the Olympians are college students, and so taking that away, I think my mind immediately jumps to what are the other trickle-down effects of that? What is that going to do to the psyche of high-profile high school players? What's next for that, right? Does it change? Obviously, everyone's goal is their dream would be to make it to the NFL, if you're a young football player. But as the money starts to trickle down and get closer and closer to the youngest players in high school and things like that, how do coaches and teachers, manage that, manage the egos and things of that nature. And I think it concerns me a lot for the future.
It's going to be interesting, that's for sure. And like you say, who knows how it's going to directly just knock a hole in the way things normally are here in the first couple of years. And it could be a little bit of a disaster, but it's definitely one of those things that once they open that Pandora's box, I don't see it going backwards, that's for sure. So
I don't think you can. And we're seeing that with the transfer portal. Obviously, we talked about NIL a little bit. That shook things up quite a bit. You can't put it back in, like you said. It's out there. So
it's out there. That's right.
It's just how far does it go? And just like most other things in the world and in life, it never stops. It never stops where it starts. Typically, it grows and grows and grows. And so just like contracts in pro sports, right? They get bigger and bigger and bigger. So what's that going to look like for colleges? What's it going to look like for smaller schools that are trying to compete, have their Cinderella story?
Mm-hmm.
Based on what these caps look like, I don't know how that's going to be possible because the best players are just going to want to go to the schools that can pay them the most money. I mean, that's just common sense.
That's right.
So, very similarly to NIL, it's just kind of going to explode now with this, and time will tell.
Time will tell for sure. Well, speaking of time, Captain West, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your service as one of your former educators. Very proud of you, young man. You keep up the good work, and hopefully maybe you'll join us on the show again someday.
Yeah, just let me know. It's been an honor, and thank you so much for thinking of me. And Whit, pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and I'll start tuning in to your guys' show. Now I know a little bit more about it.
Yeah, check us out. It's pretty fun. We just try to have a good time.
We have a great time.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's what it's all about.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you, sir. You have a good evening.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.
See ya.
Bye.
How cool was that?
That was pretty cool.
He's in charge of the satellites that's like keeping an eye on us and stuff. In general, very, very general, simplistic terms. All right. That's awesome. All right. So speaking of being an educator, I'm going to throw this up there real quick. We mentioned this at the beginning. So just to educate, and I don't know, Whit, did you fill in for your dad and do some big time Memorial Day research?
I didn't do the research. He
did.
He spoke a little bit about it.
What did he say? What did he tell you to say?
It was just like, what is we honor and remember on Memorial Day?
Right.
Stuff like that.
Okay, something like that. So first of all, there's never a bad time to shout out to our service members, current, former. But I saw this on social media. I thought this was pretty good. If you're listening, you can't see the graphic, but there is a difference. There's Armed Forces Day, where it's for those who currently serve, they currently wear the uniform. Veterans Day is for the former service folks that used to wear the uniform, is the way it lays out here. Memorial Day is for those who never made it out of the uniform. So that's a pretty good way to put it right there. So we are definitely on Memorial Day right now. And I have one just real quick bring back from the trip last week. I missed last week's shows. I was at Jillian's graduation. So there's a quick shot of Jillian. She got her master's degree from George Washington. And speaking of Memorial Day and our service, there's a really cool place to have a graduation. We're literally on the National Mall, so right beside the Washington Monument. And this was a huge graduation. Those white chairs, you can hardly see the picture, but that's just for the students. This is a 31,000 student university. They had probably graduated, I'm gonna say 3,000 or 4,000 students. So they had chairs set up for probably about 10,000 people. And if you have that many people, you got to be prepared for them to have to go to the restroom, right, Whit?
Oh yeah.
And we used to have a Porta John segment on the show. I just had to check out these Porta Johns they had at the graduation. The GI Johns with the little star. I mean, you can't get much better. That's pretty good. You can't get much better than that at the on the National Mall. All right. So anyway, we're about out of time. So we definitely want to give our shout out to Dubby. Go to w.gg, enter promo codes FUNFANS for you 10% off. I got to give a shout out to True Victory. It's another one of our sponsors. It tickers across the bottom of the screen, but it is a veteran-owned company. So we got to say something about them on our Memorial Day special. Go check them out. Enter promo code the Fanboys and get 15% off for that. And don't forget that the Fun Fans podcast is the official podcast for the second year in a row for Wayne Buckingham's and WAB Sports Orange and White Alumni Weekend fundraiser coming up that first weekend in August. It's a really great fundraiser. They get school supplies for needy kids. They give back to some scholarship money for some students with special needs that are going to college. So Google that, go to our website, find that stuff where you can get a table and rub elbows with some big time former Clemson players. And we're going to let Witt give his O's update because he
O's
definitely
update.
has a hat on.
This could be a weekly segment.
It is a weekly segment.
But quick shout out to Thrift Street. Got this at Thrift Street in Clover. $15, pretty good price.
It is pretty good.
O's update. Just had since last week we got swept by the Cardinals, which was first regular season series sweep since like 2022, which it's fine. It's whatever. It's baseball.
Yeah.
And then they bounce back. O's are a bounce back team. If they start doing poorly, they're going to come right back, hit you in the mouth, punch you around a little bit. I just got completed a 4-game sweep of the White Sox, which I mean, White Sox pretty bad, but it's all Major League Baseball. So
that's right.
Everybody's a professional.
And it's still very early. Where is it like a fourth or 20% into
About
the
50
season?
games in.
We got plenty of games. All right, so the O's are doing great. Speaking of baseball, find out tomorrow the for sure where Clemson and all the other college baseball teams are going into the regionals. So we're looking at the projection is for Clemson to be about a 6th seed. So even though we won't get into the way they've been playing. I know your dad would say it's baseball, so we're going to be fine and probably still host throughout until Omaha if we keep making that far. So, but we'll find out tomorrow, and that's all the more reason to stick with us next weekend. We'll definitely have the update. We hope you enjoyed the show. We appreciate once again Captain West being with us, and we appreciate all those who are currently serving and have served, and definitely those of the fallen and their families for making that sacrifice. And we appreciate you joining us each and every Sunday. Don't forget to click subscribe on the Fun Fans Podcast YouTube channel, as well as your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on all social media, and please share. Also, reach out to become a sponsor. On behalf of the Fun Fans Podcast, J Thrill Entertainment, the Fanboys Fangirls Podcast Network, and Witt Jackson.
See y'all later.
Happy Memorial Day, folks. Thank you. Go Tigers.